Welcome to my channel. Please like this video and subscribe. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Juliana hummed softly as she carefully applied a layer of dark red lipstick, her gaze fixed on her reflection in the bedroom mirror. The late afternoon sun bathed the room in a warm glow, accentuating the faint lines near her eyes, small reminders of her 32 years. She smoothed her fitted black dress, feeling a flutter of excitement. Going somewhere? Wesley's voice startled her, making her turn to see him leaning against the doorframe, his tie loosened and a curious look on his face. "Just meeting up with some friends," Juliana replied effortlessly, though her heart raced. "I thought you'd be working late again," she added. Wesley shrugged, his shoulders sagging slightly. "The project wrapped up earlier than expected. I thought maybe we could have dinner together for a change." Juliana felt a pang of guilt but quickly brushed it off. "Sorry, I already have plans. Maybe tomorrow?" Wesley nodded, disappointment clear on his face. "Sure, tomorrow." He retreated down the hallway, leaving Juliana alone with her thoughts. She turned back to the mirror with a sigh. The woman looking back seemed confident and attractive, everything she hadn't felt in her forte. She'd years. So Wesley was a good man, dependable and hardworking. But over time, their relationship had lost its spark. But his long hours at work left her feeling ignored, longing for more. And that more named Sullivan. Her phone buzzed with a message, "Can't wait to see you, beautiful." 30 minutes. Her pulse quickened as she read Sullivan's text. Their affair had started innocently, a random encounter at a coffee shop that led to playful conversations, and eventually, a stolen kiss that rekindled a passion she thought was long gone. Grabbing her purse, she made her way downstairs, finding Wesley in the kitchen, absent-mindedly putting together a sandwich. "I won't be out late," Juliana said, the lie tasting bitter in her mouth. Wesley glanced up, his eyes searching hers. "Jules, is everything okay? You've seemed different lately." Forcing a smile, she responded, "Everything's fine. Just busy with work and friends, you know how it is." "Yeah, I guess," Wesley answered, his tone resigned. As Juliana reached for the door, the sound of tires crunching on gravel stopped her. A car door slammed, followed by confident footsteps approaching the house. "Expecting someone?" Wesley asked, moving toward the door. Before Juliana could say anything, there was a knock. Wesley opened it to reveal a tall, handsome man with a self-assured grin. "Can I help you?" Wesley asked, confusion evident in his voice. The stranger's eyes moved past Wesley, landing on Juliana. "Ready to go, gorgeous?" he asked. Juliana felt the blood drain from her face as Wesley turned toward her, a mix of shock and realization in his eyes. "Jules, what's going on?" Wesley demanded, his voice tight with anger. As Sullivan stepped forward, his presence dominating the doorway. "I think it's pretty obvious your wife has plans with me tonight." Juliana watched as Wesley's face contorted with disbelief, hurt, and finally rage. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Wesley growled, his fists clenching at his sides. Sullivan smirked. "I'm the guy your wife's been seeing for months. Named Sullivan, by the way." Wesley spun to face Juliana, his eyes blazing. "Is this true? Have you been cheating on me?" Juliana's mouth went dry as her carefully built lies crumbled. "Wesley, it's not what you think." "Not what I think?" Wesley's voice rose, filling the room. "There's a man at our door claiming he's taking you out, and it's not what I think." Sullivan leaned against the frame, watching the scene with amusement. "Come on, Juliana, we don't want to miss our reservation." Wesley stepped between them, his body tense with fury. "You're not going anywhere with him, Jules. If you walk out that door, don't come back." Juliana felt a surge of defiance. For too long she had felt trapped, suffocated by their marriage. "You can't control me, Wesley. I'm a grown woman, and I can make my own decisions." "Decisions?" Wesley scoffed. "Like choosing to betray me, to lie to me for months?" "You haven't exactly been the perfect husband," Juliana shot back, years of resentment rising to the surface. "When was the last time you made me feel loved? Appreciated? Sullivan gives me what you haven't in years." Wesley recoiled as if slapped. "So that's it? 10 years of marriage mean nothing because I've been working hard to support us." Sullivan cleared his throat. "As interesting as this domestic drama is, we should get going, Juliana." She looked between the two men, Wesley, devastated and betrayed, and Sullivan, confident and irresistible. In that moment she made her choice. "I can do what I want," she declared, her voice trembling. "I'm free, Wesley. You can't trap me anymore." She grabbed her purse and brushed past Wesley, who stood frozen in shock. Sullivan wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her close. "Please, Jules," Wesley's voice cracked. "Don't do this, we can fix things." Juliana paused at the door, glancing back at the man she had once vowed to love forever. For a fleeting moment, doubt crept in. But then Sullivan's hand pressed against her back, urging her forward. "I'm sorry, Wesley," she said softly, "but I need to do this for me." With those words, she stepped into the warm evening air, leaving her broken marriage behind. As Sullivan led her to his car, she heard Wesley's anguished voice calling after her. "If you go now, Jules, it's over. Do you hear me? There's no coming back." Juliana slid into the passenger seat, her hands shaking as she fastened her seatbelt. Sullivan started the car, flashing her a victorious grin. "Ready for some excitement, beautiful." As they drove away, Juliana caught a glimpse of Wesley standing in the doorway, a shattered figure watching his world crumble. She turned her gaze forward, suppressing the pang of regret that threatened to rise. "More than ready," she replied, forcing a smile. The car sped forward, carrying Juliana into an unknown future, leaving behind the shattered remains of the life she once knew. The cool evening breeze rushed through her hair as Sullivan's vehicle zipped down the highway. Her heart pounded, a mix of thrill and apprehension coursing through her. She glanced over at Sullivan, his confident grin lit by the dashboard glow. "Where are we headed?" Juliana asked, her voice betraying a hint of unease. Sullivan reached over, giving her thigh a gentle squeeze. "I thought we'd start with dinner at Lair, and after that, who knows, the night's young. And so are we." Juliana forced a smile, suppressing the nagging doubts creeping in. This was what she wanted, wasn't it? Freedom. Excitement. A break from the dull routine of her marriage. When they arrived at the valet at Lamar, Sullivan walked around to open her door. "Ready to turn some heads, gorgeous?" he asked. Juliana stepped out, smoothing her dress. "Lead the way." The restaurant buzzed with energy, soft jazz playing in the background as they were escorted to their table. Juliana could feel eyes on her, some filled with admiration, others with judgment. She lifted her head, determined to embrace this new chapter of her life. Sullivan ordered an expensive bottle of wine without even glancing at the menu. "Only the best for my girl," he said, winking. As they sipped their wine, Juliana's phone buzzed incessantly in her purse. She didn't need to check to know it was Wesley. Guilt churned in her stomach, but she shoved it aside. "Everything all right?" Sullivan asked, his eyes narrowing slightly. Juliana forced a cheerful smile. "Perfect. Just perfect." The evening unfolded in a whirlwind of decadent food, flowing wine, and Sullivan's entertaining stories. But as time passed, Juliana found it harder to stay present. Her thoughts kept drifting back to Wesley, imagining him sitting alone in their house, heartbroken. As they left the restaurant, Sullivan pulled her close. "Your place or mine?" he whispered. Juliana hesitated. I'm not sure that's a good idea tonight." Now Sullivan's grip on her arm tightened ever so slightly. "Come on, Jules. After everything that happened today, you're going to act coy now." "I'm not playing games," Juliana replied, pulling away. "I just need some time to process everything." Sullivan's charming demeanor faltered, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. "Fine. I'll take you to a hotel, then. You shouldn't go home tonight anyway." The drive to the hotel was tense, Sullivan's earlier warmth replaced by a cold silence. As they pulled up to the entrance, he finally spoke. "I'll pick you up tomorrow morning. We'll start looking for an apartment." Juliana's head snapped up. "Apartment hunting? Sullivan, I haven't even." "You made your choice, Juliana," he cut her off, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Or would you rather crawl back to your husband with your tail between your legs?" Juliana winced at his harsh words. This wasn't the Sullivan she thought she knew. "I'll see you in the morning," she whispered, climbing out of the car. As she checked into the hotel, the weight of her situation hit her. She was alone, cut off from the home she once knew, her life turned upside down in just a few hours. In the quiet of her room, she finally checked her phone. Dozens of missed calls and messages from Wesley, each more desperate than the last. With trembling fingers, she dialed his number. "Jules." Wesley's voice was raw, as though he had been crying. "Where are you? Please, come home. We can work this out." Juliana's throat tightened. "I can't, Wesley. Not tonight." "Why?" The hurt in his voice was unmistakable. "Is it because of him, Jules? This isn't you. You're throwing away everything we've built." "Maybe what we built wasn't enough," Juliana whispered, barely able to get the words out. "I need time. I need to figure things out." Wesley's voice grew cold. "Time? You want time while you're out there with another man? Do you have any idea what you're doing to me, to us?" "I'm sorry," Juliana choked out, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did." Wesley's voice was icy. "You made your choice, Juliana. Now you have to live with it." So the line went dead, leaving Juliana alone with her thoughts. The following weeks passed in a blur. True to his word, Sullivan helped Juliana find an apartment. They spent their days exploring the city, trying new restaurants, and their nights tangled up in each other's arms. On the surface, it was everything Juliana had ever wanted: passion, spontaneity, freedom from her old responsibilities. But as the initial excitement wore off, the cracks in her new life began to show. Sullivan's once charming confidence often turned into arrogance. His possessiveness, which had seemed thrilling at first, started to feel suffocating. One evening, as they were getting ready to go out, Juliana found herself longing for a quiet night in. "Do we have to go out tonight?" she asked, slipping off her heels. "Maybe we could just stay in, order some takeout, and watch a movie." Sullivan's eyes flashed with irritation. "Come on, Jules. Don't tell me you're already turning into a homebody. I thought you wanted excitement." "I do, but nothing." Sullivan cut her off, tossing her shoes back to her. "Get dressed. I didn't sign up for a quiet night in." Juliana bit her lip, holding back the retort that was on the tip of her tongue. This wasn't the first time Sullivan had brushed aside her brushes, but she told herself it was a small price to pay for the life she now had. As weeks turned into months, these small moments of tension became more frequent. Sullivan's critiques of her clothes, her friends, even her laugh, were a constant undercurrent in their relationship. One afternoon, as Juliana folded laundry, she found one of Wesley's old t-shirts mixed in with her things from the rushed move. She held it up, inhaling the familiar scent of home. For a brief moment, she let herself remember the good times, lazy Sunday mornings, inside jokes, the comfort of knowing someone always had her back. The sound of the front door slamming jolted her from her thoughts. Rice Sullivan stormed in, his face dark with fury. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, thrusting his phone in front of Juliana. On the screen was a picture of her having lunch with a male colleague earlier that day. "It's just lunch with Tom from accounting," Juliana explained, her heart pounding. "We were talking about the Johnson project." Sullivan's eyes narrowed. "Look pretty cozy for a work lunch. Is that why you've been so distant, already lining up your next victim?" "Victim?" Juliana's voice rose in disbelief. "What are you even talking about? It was just a lunch." "Don't play dumb, Jules," Sullivan spat. "I know your type, always chasing the next thrill, the next guy to string along." Juliana flinched as if struck. "My type? You don't know anything about me, if that's how you see me." "Yeah, I know enough," Sullivan growled, grabbing her arm. "You're a cheat, a liar. Why would I be any different from your husband?" Juliana yanked her arm free, emotions swirling inside her: fear, anger, and hurt. "You're nothing like Wesley. He never treated me like this." Sullivan's laugh was bitter. "Then why did you leave him?" "Face it, Jules, you're damaged goods. I'm the best thing you'll ever get." His words landed like a physical blow, leaving Juliana reeling. Tears filled her eyes as she stumbled back. Without a word, she grabbed her purse and fled the apartment, Sullivan's angry shouts following her as she ran down the stairs. She wandered the streets, her mind spinning. How had her life come to this? The excitement and passion she had once longed for had twisted into something dark and suffocating. As night fell, she found herself in a familiar neighborhood. Without overthinking it, she walked up the path to her old home, Wesley's house. Her hand shook as she pressed the doorbell, each second stretching into an eternity. Finally, the door opened, and there stood Wesley. He looked older, tired, his eyes widening with shock at the sight of her. "Juliana!" His voice was guarded, a far cry from the warmth she remembered. "What are you doing here?" Juliana opened her mouth, but no words came. Instead, a sob escaped her lips, months of bottled-up emotions spilling out. Wesley's expression softened momentarily, but his features soon hardened again. "Come in," he said gruffly. "You shouldn't be out on the street like this." She followed him into the living room, the familiar surroundings both comforting and painful. Sinking onto the couch, she struggled to find the right words. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know where else to go." Wesley stood by the fireplace, his posture stiff. What happened? Did Loverboy finally show his true colors? The bitterness in his voice stung. "Wesley, I made a terrible mistake," Juliana admitted, her voice trembling. "I thought I wanted freedom, excitement, but I was wrong. So wrong. And now what?" Wesley's voice was cold. "You think you can just come back and everything will be forgiven? Like we can just pick up where we left off?" Juliana shook her head, tears flowing down her face again. "No, I don't expect that. I just needed to see you. To tell you how sorry I am for what I did." Wesley remained silent for a long moment, his inner conflict clear. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but controlled. "Do you have any idea what you put me through, Jules? The humiliation, the pain. I trusted you, and you threw it all away for what? A fling with some arrogant jerk?" "It wasn't just a fling," Juliana murmured. "I thought I loved him, but it wasn't real. None of it was real. Wesley let out a humorless laugh. And what about our marriage? Was that real, or was I just holding a place until something more exciting came along? Juliana stood, taking a cautious step toward him. Our marriage was the most real thing in my life, Wesley. I was too blind to see it then, but I see it now. I know I hurt you, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. For a brief moment, something flickered in Wesley's eyes, a glimmer of the love they had once shared, but just as quickly it was gone, replaced by a steely resolve. I appreciate your apology, Juliana, he said in a formal tone, but it doesn't change anything. You made your choice and we both have to live with the consequences. Juliana's heart shattered again at his words. Wesley, please, can't we at least talk? There's nothing to talk about, Wesley interrupted. It's late, you should go. We both need to move on with our lives. Juliana stood frozen, the finality of his words hitting her like a wave. This was the real cost of her choices. Everything she had gambled on a fantasy was gone. With a shaky nod, she picked up her purse and walked toward the door. Pausing, she turned back one last time. I'm truly sorry, Wesley, for everything. Wesley's face was unreadable, his emotions tightly controlled. Goodbye, Juliana. As the door closed behind her, the weight of her choices pressed down on her. The life she had known, the love she had taken for granted, all of it was gone, leaving her alone in the cold night, facing an uncertain future of her own making. She stood on the sidewalk, the chill of the night creeping into her bones. Wesley's final goodbye echoed in her mind, a haunting reminder of everything she had lost. Wrapping her arms around herself, she tried to hold together the fragments of her broken world as she wandered aimlessly through the darkened streets, her thoughts racing. Where could she go now? The idea of returning to Sullivan made her stomach churn. Her apartment no longer felt like a refuge, but a prison she had built herself. With every step, the weight of her choices seemed to grow heavier, threatening to overwhelm her. The following days passed in a blur. Juliana called in sick to work, unable to face the routine of office life when everything else had collapsed. She ignored Sullivan's increasingly furious calls and texts, each one a reminder of how badly she had misjudged him and herself. On the fifth day, sitting in her dimly lit apartment surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and the remnants of her shattered dreams, a sharp knock at the door jolted her from her daze. Her heart raced as she approached the door. Was it Sullivan coming to pick up where their argument had left off, or worse, had he found out about a visit to Wesley? Taking a deep breath, she opened the door. To her shock, it was Wesley who stood in the hallway. Wesley's expression was firm, filled with determination. Juliana's voice trembled as she spoke. Wesley, what are you doing here? His eyes, once so warm, were now cold and distant. We need to talk, Juliana. May I come in? Without a word, she stepped aside, allowing him entry. As he passed, the familiar scent of him stirred painful memories of the life she had left behind. Wesley stood in the middle of the living room, surveying the disorder around him. His gaze settled on a framed picture of Juliana and Sullivan, and his jaw tightened visibly. "It's a nice place," he said, his tone thick with sarcasm. "I hope it was worth it." Juliana recoiled at his harsh words. "Wesley." He raised a hand, cutting her off. "Don't. I'm not here for apologies or excuses. I'm here because we need to settle this." "Settle?" Juliana's voice wavered. "What do you mean?" Wesley's eyes locked onto hers, cold and resolute. "Divorce, Juliana. I've thought about it long enough, and I can't stay in this limbo any longer. Our marriage is over, and it's time to make it official." The word divorce hit Juliana like a punch to the gut. Despite everything, a part of her had held on to the hope that they might find their way back to one another. That hope was now in ruins. "Wesley, please," she pleaded, tears welling in her eyes. "Can't we try to work through this? What we had." "What we had is dead," Wesley cut in sharply. "You killed it the moment you walked out that door with him." He motioned toward the photo of Sullivan. "You made your decision, Juliana. Now you need to live with the consequences." Her legs gave way and she collapsed onto the couch, overwhelmed. "I know I made a terrible mistake, Wesley, but our marriage meant everything to me. Isn't there room in your heart for forgiveness?" Wesley's laugh was sharp and devoid of humor. "Forgive you? Do you even understand what you put me through? The humiliation of my wife leaving me for another man, the pitiful looks from friends and co-workers, the sleepless nights wondering what I did wrong." His words struck deep, each one a painful reminder of the hurt she had caused. "And now what?" Wesley's voice grew louder, each word carrying more weight. "You've had your fun, realized the grass wasn't greener, and now you think you can just come back. That's not how this works, Juliana. Actions have consequences, and it's time you dealt with yours." Juliana lifted her head, her face streaked with tears. "I know I hurt you, Wesley. I know I can never undo that. But what we had, it was real. Please don't throw it away at one mistake. One mistake. Wesley's eyes flared with anger. You call months of lying and cheating one mistake? This wasn't a slip-up, Juliana. You systematically tore our marriage apart, piece by piece. He paced the room, running a hand through his hair in frustration. You know what hurts the most? I never saw it coming. I trusted you completely. I thought we were happy, that we had a future. Meanwhile, you were planning your escape. Juliana stood, reaching out toward him. It wasn't like that, Wesley. I never planned. Don't. Wesley jerked away from her touch as though it burned. Don't try to justify what you did. There's no excuse, no explanation will make this right. The silence that followed was thick with tension, the weight of their shared past and broken trust hanging heavily in the air. Finally, Wesley spoke again, his voice quieter but no less resolute. I want you out of the house, Juliana. You get all your things out by the end of the week. I'll have my lawyer draw up the divorce papers. The sooner this is over, the better. Juliana felt as if the ground had fallen away beneath her. You're kicking me out, Wesley. That's our home, we built it together. No, Wesley's voice was icy. I built it. I worked 60-hour weeks to pay for that house, to give us the life you said you wanted. And how did you thank me? By throwing it all away for a fling with a man you barely knew. Each word hit her like a blow, reminding her of the selfishness that had led to her betrayal. Juliana sank back down onto the couch, drained of the will to fight. Where am I supposed to go? Wesley's laugh was bitter. That's not my concern anymore, is it? You made your bed, Juliana. Now you get to lie in it. I'm sure your lover will be more than willing to take you in. At the mention of Sullivan, a fresh wave of shame washed over her. Sullivan and I, it's over. I realize what a terrible mistake I made. How convenient for you, Wesley sneered. And now what? You just crawl back, and I'd welcome you with open arms. That's not how the real world works, Juliana, Wesley said coldly. You can't just hit reset on people's lives once you're done with your games. Juliana looked up at him, really looked at the man she had once vowed to love forever. The pain and anger on his face were a stark reminder of the damage she had caused. In that moment, she fully grasped the enormity of what she had lost, not just a husband, but a partner, a friend, and a future. I'm so sorry, Wesley, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I know it doesn't change anything, but I truly regret all the pain I've caused you. For a split second, Wesley's expression softened, but then it hardened again. You're right. It doesn't change a thing. I want you out of the house by Friday. After that, we'll communicate through our lawyers. He moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. For a brief moment, Juliana dared to hope he might turn back, might offer some small sign of forgiveness. But when he finally spoke, his voice was cold and resolute. Goodbye, Juliana. I hope your freedom was worth the price. The door closed behind him with a soft click, a sound that seemed deafening in the silence of the apartment. Juliana sat frozen, the weight of her actions crashing down on her. She had gambled everything: her marriage, her home, her future on a fantasy that had crumbled to dust in her hands. The days that followed passed in a blur of grief and regret. Juliana moved mechanically through the motions of packing. Each item she handled a painful reminder of what she had thrown away. Friends called, their voices a mix of concern and judgment, but she ignored their messages. What could she possibly say to explain the magnitude of her mistake and the depth of her loss? On Friday morning, Juliana stood in the driveway of the home she had once shared with Wesley. Her car was packed with the remnants of her life boxes piled haphazardly in the back seat and trunk. She held the house key in her hand, its familiar weight now a burden. The front door opened, and Wesley stepped out. He looked exhausted, the past few months clearly having taken their toll. For a brief second, their eyes met, and Juliana felt a flicker of the connection they had once shared. But it was gone just as quickly, replaced by a wall of hurt and betrayal. Is that everything? Wesley asked, his voice devoid of emotion. Juliana nodded, afraid her voice might break if she tried to speak. She extended the key, her hand trembling slightly. Wesley took it carefully, avoiding any contact between their fingers. The lawyers will handle the division of assets, he said. I trust you won't make this any more difficult than it needs to be. No, Juliana managed to choke out. I won't fight you on anything. Wesley, you deserve, her voice faltered. You deserve better than what I gave you. A flicker of something: pain, regret. She couldn't tell passed over Wesley's face. For a heartbeat, Juliana allowed herself to hope that he might soften, might offer some small comfort or closure. But when he spoke again, his voice was firm and final. Goodbye, Juliana. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. With that, he turned and walked back into the house, shutting the door on their shared life with a decisive click. Juliana stood there a moment longer, staring at the home that no longer belonged to her. Memories washed over her: lazy Sunday mornings, holiday celebrations, quiet evenings spent on the couch. All of it gone, sacrificed on the altar of her own selfish desires and discontent. Climbing into her car, a sob caught in her throat. She had believed she wanted freedom, excitement, and escape from the mundane. But now, faced with the reality of her choices, she realized too late the true value of what she had carelessly discarded. Juliana started the engine, taking one last look at the house in a rearview mirror. The life she had known, the love she had taken for granted, and the future she had once dreamed of, all of it lay behind her now, as unreachable as a mirage in the desert. As she drove away, the weight of her decisions pressed heavily on her. She had dismantled the foundation of her life, brick by brick, and now she was left with nothing but the rubble, forced to rebuild from the ruins. The road ahead was uncertain, lonely, a testament to the consequences of her actions. In the end, Juliana realized that the freedom she had desperately craved had become a prison of her own making. The excitement she had sought turned into ashes, and the love she had so carelessly thrown away that was the greatest loss of all, a wound that would never fully heal. As the house faded into the distance, Juliana faced the harsh truth of her new reality. She had made her choice, and now she would have to live with the consequences. The future stretched out before her like a blank canvas, filled with nothing but regret and the bitter knowledge of what she had lost. The story of Juliana and Wesley, a tale of love, betrayal, and irreparable damage, had come to its inevitable conclusion. And in the silence of her car, driving toward an uncertain future, Juliana finally understood the true cost of her actions. She had gained her freedom, but in the process she had lost everything that had ever truly mattered.